and welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland Preview Podcast. Life as a Sunderland fan is never boring, is it? Following a defeat to bottom of the league Wigan Athletic, we smashed second from top Lincoln City 4-0 before our almost entire team went down with COVID-19, and somehow we managed to struggle to a 1-1 draw with AFC Wimbledon last night. So, assuming Saturday goes ahead, our next task is an away trip to Shrewsbury Town, and to preview Saturday's game with ourselves is Ollie from the best Shrewsbury podcast in the land, Salop. How are you doing, Ollie? Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you, mate. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely not a problem in the slightest. I think much like ourselves this season, things haven't gone completely to plan for yourselves this season, and you've changed manager. So Sam Ricketts came to Shrewsbury, highly rated, I would say, but he never really seemed to get going from what I could see from you guys and what you post on Twitter. How do you sum up Sam Ricketts' spell in charge?
Yeah, it was an interesting era now looking back. Obviously, it's a couple of weeks now. Flattered to deceive, I think, is probably a fair summary. He talked a good game, and clearly he knows football. He's obviously he's a qualified coach. He played highest level of the game, but I think he fundamentally struggled to kind of, translate his ideas to the players. Even last season when we finished 15th, I do question if we would have actually finished 15th if the season ended. We had some good runs in the Cubs, but that suggests that maybe the players are up for those games a bit more. And we kind of struggled with our bread and butter in the league. Like didn't score enough goals. And this season was just awful. I think he left on 13 games with one win, which is clearly just not very good, especially with, Shrewsbury have not got a squad, where we should be pushing the playoffs. But I think most people, journalists and fans alike, would say that Shrewsbury have a solid League One team and we shouldn't really be in a relegation zone. So, yeah, really pleased that era is over. It's really nice to be able to. It's really weird, isn't it, when you have a manager who isn't doing very well? I'm sure you guys are similar with your last manager, where you love your team so much, but you know that losing a game mean that maybe the pain will end sooner. It's almost like pulling that plaster off. You almost need to, which is really weird feeling. You don't really want your team to struggle, but yeah, we're in this new era now, and everyone's much happier.
Talking about Shrewsbury in general, I suppose I'm asking you to go back a few years here and probably give me the short answer to a very, very long question, I suppose. But when we first came down, obviously, I think we drew 1-1 and we won 2-0 at your place. But when we first came down, you were classed as one of the teams that would be pushing for promotion based on sort of previous years. I think you got that checker trade, the same as us. You got a checker trade final and player final in the same year, like we did in our first season. And you're probably right in what you're saying. I think from the outside looking in, Shrewsbury shouldn't have been 23rd, which is where they were when Sam Ricketts left. You should be at least pushing mid-table with the squad you have. So that's still a bit of a contrast from, promotion or playoff hopeful. So where did it start to go wrong? Obviously, Paul Hurst left, but where did it start to go wrong outside of that Shrewsbury became mid-table and then below mid-table and then, unfortunately, in a relegation zone and just getting out of it? But how did that change so fastly, and what was the main cog that changed it?
Yeah, so we had that team that did really well. It's quite funny talking about it now because, the players' names are even bigger than they were, say, we talked about this 2 years ago. Yeah. So we had Ben Godfrey in central midfield. He played a defensive midfield role and a pivot, who's now playing in the Premier League and is a multi-million-pound transfer player. And we had Dean Henderson in goal, who I said at the time he would play for England when he was playing in League One for Shrewsbury. Some of the saves he made were just like, wow, like, how has he got to that? We had Carlton Morris on loan, who was really good. He had a really good season, and for me, it was just like almost the perfect storm. We had a manager that was quite pragmatic, was quite made the team really fit, and we had a good blend of young kids that were really ambitious with some really experienced pros, and we just got this basically like the first game of the season we scored in like the 90th minute against Northampton, and I do wonder what would happen if we hadn't won that game, and then we just started snowballing. Then what happened at the end of the season was Paul Hurst left. But as you know, contracts at this level are normally 2 years. So we lost all the players on loan. And then a lot of the players that kind of left us went on to other clubs, never really actually kind of did anything. Ogogo, Bristol, Ogogo and Rodman and some of these guys kind of moved on. Their careers never really went any higher. So they kind of all just fell apart. And then what we did then is we continued the strategy of recruiting an up-and-coming manager. But we got John Askey, who came from Macclesfield, and without saying too much, I did hear things about training and stuff, and it wasn't very good. And then we went for Sam Ricketts, which was a similar mould, and basically it just hasn't worked. And then what's happened under Sam Ricketts is Sam Ricketts took responsibility of everything. And we used to have a really good head of recruitment called Adam Henshaw, who actually went to Doncaster Rovers. And our recruitment has got worse since he left. And it's really, really crazy, actually, that Cotterill's come in and he's put all those things back in place, which is, really good news for us, because then we can, start looking upwards again.
Quite interesting. You said the head of recruitment went to Doncaster, because we played Doncaster the other week and I had a Doncaster fan on, and they've obviously got loans from Arsenal, Man City, Premier League clubs, which is very similar to probably what you had at that time. I don't know if Norwich were in the Premier League at the time. Was that where Carl Morris came from at the time?
Yeah, so Carl Morris came from Norwich, Ben Coffey came from Norwich, and I can't remember if they were in the Premier League or if they were I think they were in the Championship that year.
Yeah.
But clearly Adam Henshaw and the manager. But I think it's probably must have been quite a bit with Henshaw, built a good relationship with bigger teams, which gave them the confidence. And it's really interesting. We actually had someone from Norwich come to see us and they were really surprised how good the training ground was and how good the facilities were. And actually, at that time we were quite advanced in terms of using data and having analysts and GPS tracking and training and stuff. It's a shame that all kind of fell apart. But I guess that just shows, and obviously we've seen it this season with Oxford. League One is just a crazy, crazy league. Now we've played the top 5. It would have been the top 6, 7 if Charlton had not dropped down to 7th. But there isn't really much between them. We haven't played you guys yet, but we've played Accrington, a really good team, Charlton, a good team, Lincoln, but none of them are really special.
Yeah.
There's no team that has that kind of X factor. So that season we nearly went up. Blackburn Rovers and Wigan were just miles above everyone else in terms of quality. Don't have that this season, which I guess for you guys is probably even more frustrating, because if you've got a couple of good players, maybe even just a better striker and a better midfielder with a good manager, and you'd walk this league, it's probably more frustrating for you guys knowing that.
That's how it feels. I think in previous seasons we would have completely fell away. I think we're 9th at the minute, but no one wants to win League One, and anyone can beat anyone. It's like, I used to say that was the Championship, and I thought League One was a bit different, but you're right in what you're saying. Anyone at any level, at any ground, can beat anyone, especially with the current COVID situation. One thing I have found quite interesting with Shrewsbury over the time, because obviously I've followed you guys for a few years now, and every time a manager does go or a manager's not doing well, you kind of do with Sunderland, and there's always rumours where Paul Hurst is linked to it. But universally, I would say, almost anyway, Shrewsbury fans seem to be completely against that idea. Has the relationship between yourselves and Paul Hurst disintegrated to that point, or is it just a case that he hasn't kicked on and you think, nah, progressive?
It's interesting you say that. I guess it'd be interesting which counts you've seen that from, because I'd say probably just above majority would probably actually wanted Paul Hurst back.
Oh, really?
But then, it's probably quite close, probably a bit like the Brexit vote. It's quite close on both sides. Some people are thinking, let's just get this manager back who was so successful. Knowing what I know, he was never ever going to come back. So I guess when you know that and you've been told that, you kind of put it to bed. And for me, I always think it's always best to go forward. You look at Bradford, keep getting Stuart McCall back, and I just don't really understand why you keep getting the same manager back all the time, especially when there's so many different. It's all about a lot of management is about personalities and stuff, and the likelihood of Paul Hurst repeating that feat, to me, it seems really small. So why not go with someone fresh? There's so many people out there. Why not go for someone new?
Coming from the man myself that said I would love Gus Poyet back about 2 weeks ago, I suppose I was going to agree with you there. But it's a funny similarity, because it does tend to happen with Sunderland. You always get the Roy Keane and the should Gus Poyet come back. And I think Gus was really, really close to coming back to Sunderland, and that would have been an exciting appointment. But I'm very, very comfortable with Lee Johnson, so I understand, why you'd very much feel the same way. Before I move on to the new manager and stuff like that, I think you've kind of alluded to it, but sort of straightforward question. When Ricketts was sacked, you were winless in, I think it was 8 at the time, sitting second bottom of the league. Was the run of form entirely Ricketts' fault, or was there other matters at play as well?
That's a really good question. I'll start with that by saying that the players continued to work for him. They never stopped, which is really interesting, which says a lot about the players. And maybe says a bit about the relationship with the players. They obviously did like him, and they were working for him. But did they fear him? I'm not saying you should fear every manager, but I think every good football manager has a little bit of a steel side to them. A little bit of something where you kind of like, who's the most successful manager at the moment? Klopp. I'm sure his players love him, but they know that he's got this like kind of dark side to him that, and I think you need that in a football manager, especially it's not a normal office environment, is it? It's football's quite a different, unique kind of working environment. For me, how to put this? I actually started like a list in February this year of why we should have sacked the manager. So way back then, there was just things that I just felt that weren't working. We didn't seem to learn from our mistakes. And we'd set ourselves up really well against sides. And then 20 minutes into the game, the opposition would just turn the game. And Sam Ricketts could never change a game in a game. He never made a substitution, or he would very rarely make a tactical change that actually changed the game in our favour. And when that's happened to you consistently, you kind of question. And then recruitment's been really, really poor this summer. I think we panicked at the end and signed a couple of older players. All kind of facets of the game. And then it's never good when the manager's getting quite spiky with the media, doesn't really answer questions properly, which kind of gives you a bit of an insight to what's going on. But in terms of how we were playing, and also I guess another way of putting it as well is quite interesting is, you hear things through different people who've got connections to the game.
Yeah.
And the rumours and messages from opposition players was that we were tiring after 35 minutes and that we were nothing special at all. I think it was a Northampton player even said that in his press conference, saying, I don't know why we respected them for the first 20 minutes. And then they went on to win. And other players are saying that about us as well. So, those in the industry were kind of being quite critical of Shrewsbury.
It's quite interesting, the similarities between sort of what you're saying there, maybe not the fitness side of things, and Phil Parkinson is, because I think you play 3-5-2, which it looks like Cotterill's continued with, but I've seen a lot of criticism towards him being quite rigid in that system, which is identical to Parkinson. It just wasn't working. We've changed it. But interestingly enough, I suppose I should probably ask this question first before going into it. Steve Cotterill, before we go into his formation, the fact that he stayed with that, he's the man who came in to replace Ricketts. And I'll be honest, it's a long time ago, but his time at Sunderland is probably laughed at in points, but that's probably more Howard Wilkinson's fault than anything else. And he was very young at the time, and I don't think he'd really been a big manager or been a manager at many clubs. I think one club at the time. But he's actually had a really good career at this level. I spoke to a Bristol City reporter last week, and they absolutely love him at Bristol City because he dominated this league. He's gone on to have a fairly decent career, is basically what I'm saying. But what did you make of the appointment when it was first announced? Because it seemed a bit of a left of centre, shall we say?
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, it's funny. For the Shrews fans, it wasn't so much because the chairman has been known for a long time that the chairman has a good relationship with Steve Cotterill.
Mm-hmm.
There was this is a very random little story, but when we got relegated to the conference many moons ago, the chairman actually asked Steve Cotterill for a meeting, and they met for 4 hours at a motorway service station, and he spoke to him about what you need to do to get out of the conference. And I think the chairman's always thanked him for that. And I think they've been remaining in contact, not every year, or, they weren't texting each other every week, but, every year or so they were still making contact. So apparently as soon as Sam Ricketts got sacked, literally like an hour later, the chairman phoned up Steve Cotterill and offered him the job. In terms of were we surprised or whatever, what were my initial thoughts, I wasn't overwhelmed at first, if I'm honest. I thought, we've got a manager that's, been sacked before, that's my impression of him. He went to all these different clubs in the Championship. And he's kind of been sacked, and my timeline quickly got dominated by two sets of fans. Lots of unhappy Blues fans being quite negative about him, and then lots of Bristol City fans on the other side saying he was, the best thing since sliced bread. Shrewsbury Town fans, we'd had Paul Hurst, we had John Askey, and we had Sam Ricketts, and they're all up and coming young managers that managed at a lower level. And one of the things that a lot of Shrewsbury Town fans were saying was, we'd rather have an experienced head. And I think we were never going to afford or attract a Lee Johnson or a Danny Cowley because we just don't have the budget for their ambition, and that's fair enough. So for me, as interesting as chatting to a few friends, I don't think Shrewsbury fans are ever really going to be too excited about a manager appointment.
Yeah.
There's very few clubs that are, and probably Sunderland as well now. There's very few clubs that are going to get a manager and go, yeah, he's exactly the man we wanted. Like Liverpool fans got Klopp. Most clubs are going to have most fan bases are going to be upset in some way. And I said this to a few fans. Shrewsbury fans are never going to be happy when you get an appointment, because either we're going to get a manager that's been sacked a lot and has a history of not performing so well, or has performed and not performed, that kind of mix, or we're going to have someone who's untried and tested and the fans say he's the cheap option. So the board are never really going to win in that sense. So we signed Cotterill, heard good things from Bristol City fans, and then his first press conference, wow, it was just a breath of fresh air. He is clearly an absolute football nut. He's just obsessed with football.
Yeah.
And is just so passionate about the game. One of the things that was really kind of getting quite frustrating for Town fans, especially when you're doing a podcast, is that Sam Ricketts never gave anything away. He was scared to tell anything to the media. So he would just basically, if you wrote down what he'd said and then tried to repeat it, it just there's nothing in it. I stopped watching post-match interviews, which is not really great for a podcast, because that's, forms part of your agenda. But there was just nothing in it. There was nothing to say, nothing to report, nothing to comment on. Steve Cotterill's, every Town fan is watching the press conferences now, because they're really interested. He's talking about, he's training the central defenders to, do the basics and open their shoulders out, or he's talking about the positional play of certain players, or he's sharing bits of information about how we're going to set up. From his press conferences, even just the first one, I just felt really confident that we had the right man that was going to take us forward. And then on back of that, he brought in a head of recruitment straight away. So we've got Keith Burt from Cambridge, and we've played in Cambridge in the FA Cup, and they've signed some good players. So that's promising. He's brought in an experienced player in Aaron Wilbraham, assistant manager, who's just retired from Rochdale. He's 40. And it's really fascinating, his interview, because Cotterill said to him, and the manager wanted me because I was only just retired. So, everything he says just makes sense. Yeah, you want your assistant to be a bit younger when you're a bit older and have that connection to the players. And because he's just retired. So, literally, there's nothing you really can kind of criticize him. And one thing I quite like about him is he's got this edge. So if the media ask him a bit of a question that he doesn't really like, or is a bit of maybe a daft question or a bit of a leading question, he'll be quite assertive in his messages, which obviously leads to you assume that he's going to be very assertive with the players and very clear with them.
He was an interesting character with Sunderland, but we're going back so far, you can't really compare it. But one thing that always sticks out in my mind with him at that point, it was a horrendous time. And again, I cannot really attribute any of it to him, but that's the abiding memory I have of him, is he always used to have a notepad on the touchline. And this was when he was assistant, obviously, under Howard Wilkinson. I'm guessing he's ditched the notepad by this point.
No, he had that on. I saw that last night. Yeah, he did. But for me, what's wrong? I don't see a problem with that. For me, he was talking to a centre half who we've obviously, from a couple of years ago, we had a really good defence last year, and it's completely fallen apart this year. We were conceding really, really simple goals, really scrappy goals. And he's talking to the centre back, and we've had 2 clean sheets against Lincoln and Hull.
Yeah.
So, if he's using that notepad to kind of organise, and I guess maybe that's just a bit of a change of times. I guess back in the days, maybe he was just doing stuff ahead of time, and now having laptops and notes and stuff is the norm. And interestingly, going back to his time at Birmingham, a lot of fans, some fans who I was speaking to, who were being a bit more positive about him, was saying, well, actually, apparently Cotterill did a lot of the work when Harry Redknapp was at Birmingham, and they had a little bit of success and won a few games. And apparently Cotterill was doing all the training sessions. So as you say, every situation is different. But I think fair to say all Town fans are pretty happy with him at the moment.
Yeah, and Cotterill's time at Sunderland was a good 20 years ago. And I think, to be fair, he came in as, funnily enough, the Aaron Wilbraham, if you prefer, the young assistant manager that was meant to take over, I think, from Wilkinson. And unfortunately, it just never really happened. You touched before on the defence changing a bit. Now, your last 3 games, which aren't against bad teams, as you touched before, Lincoln, Hull, Charlton, there's been a total of only 4 shots on target against you. Now, I was touching on it a bit before. He hasn't changed the formation from what I can see. He's continued with the 3 at the back, but obviously something's tightened up somewhere. How have you managed to tighten up so fast and change that so quickly?
Yeah, it's interesting. So actually, the start of the season, Sam Ricketts dropped his 3 at the back and went to a 4-3-3, which didn't really work that well. And again, this comes back to recruitment. We have got 3 central defenders, and we play 3 at the back. So basically, it's the confidence of the players went down. Results were not going very well. Players were making errors. We were scoring really scrappy goals. So confidence just kind of dropped. It was quite actually good. Actually, the first game he had was against Oxford City in the FA Cup, but it wasn't a great performance. Town fans were getting really angry, and I was a bit confused. I was like, well, he's been here for like 3 hours, and we're failing in League One. Why is it going to be any different just because we're playing a poor opposition? And what he's done is literally he's just gone back to basics. So basically, when we played with Sam Ricketts, we played a very kind of defensive 5-2-3. Not the Chelsea style of 3-4-3. So basically, what happened was kind of like the front 3 were kind of spread across the pitch, and kind of were pressing up front, but not really helping in midfield. And then the back 5 was really a back 5. But what's happened now is we've actually gone to a more of a 3-4-1-2 formation. And then the number 10 does drop in and fill spaces. And then last night, in the second half, we defended most of the half, to be honest. We didn't really create a lot. And basically, he's just got them really, really well organised. So he's got the defenders doing the basics, opening shoulders, shaping up well. I'm sure he's done some work just trying to build their confidence. I think I get the impression that he's kind of a neat detail. So we played Hull. And this is a good example. After the game, he was talking about how their fullbacks like to cut inside. And Honeyman is one of the best creative players in the league.
Oh, that would be a controversial opinion on this one.
That's he's got the most assists in the league apparently, and
I
his
love
left
him.
foot.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because I was watching the game and Ollie Norburn, who's playing in central midfield, kept taking at these like what looked like really odd positions. And basically he was given, and the reason that was because he was basically saying, you can use your right foot and I will give you this huge area of the pitch, but you wouldn't let him do anything on his left foot. And we completely shut Hull down. Like absolutely shut them down. So I think it's a combination of just really, really good management. Built the players some confidence, got them back to basics in terms of their defending, and then we would defend in this in the lines 3. So 3, 4, 1, and a 2, and we just cover the space. Lincoln got behind us a few times when they switched the ball and overloaded with a winger and a fullback, but Hull were too slow at doing that. And for me, the defence has a lot to thank from the field, but the defensive also. So Ebanks, Landau, he had against Hull, he had an absolutely amazing game, winning headers, winning tackles, winning blocks. I didn't realise his pass percentage was only 20%, but he was doing so well defending. I didn't even really notice that. It's just back to basics, and he just seems to have just built the confidence in the team really, really quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, you know what? It's difficult to judge a team with a new manager after 4 games, but on paper, it's 2 terrific results, really. 2 results that we'd be overjoyed with, let alone a team that was previously in the relegation zone and is now, I think, just out of it. I think 20th or maybe 21st, I could be wrong. Looking on paper, though, which is a lot of the time what you have to do from this side, because 9 times out of 10 when you're playing, Sunderland are playing, so I don't really get a chance to see anything outside of Quest highlights. But Sean Wally looks like the man to watch. He's obviously got 4 league goals, a couple of assists. One thing I've noticed is that, which is strange, although you've got Jason Cummins, which is someone I know very well living in Scotland, there appears to be no out-and-out striker and the goals are more shared around. Would that be a fair assessment, or has things changed under Cotterill?
No, I think to fix that problem, we'd have to wait for January. So we've got Leon Clark, who obviously you guys will know from playing for Sheffield United in the Premier League, and he's been injured. So that's a shame. He did look quite good, but he got injured quite early on. We've got Daniel Udoh, who plays up front for us, who's come from non-league. We signed from Telford and scored quite a few goals in non-league, but clearly that's a big jump up. He hasn't scored enough goals, but in the last few games, he has been absolutely amazing. Like the turnaround in his confidence, like holding the play up, his positioning has been much improved. So essentially what we're playing is up front is we're basically playing Daniel Udoh as a kind of pressing forward, bit of a target man, but he's not that tall, but he's quite strong. And then Sean Worley's kind of making all the runs. So Sean Worley's played most of his career as a right winger, and he's just making all the runs. So the goal against Lincoln comes from both Daniel Udoh and Sean Worley pressed in their centre halves. Daniel Doe closed down one of the defenders. He passes a bad pass to his colleague, his central defender colleague. Sean Morley gets the ball. The central defender fouls Udo, and basically Sean's just standing there with the goalkeeper and the defender. They both seem to fall over, and he just passes the ball into the back of the net. So yeah, Sean's always been quite a frustrating player because he's probably one of the best dribblers in the league. His dribbling is phenomenal. He's earned us so many free kicks and penalties and getting players sent off over the years because his dribbling is so good. But I've always been a bit critical of his finishing. But yeah, he's been taking his chances this year. Going back to kind of strikers, and if Leon Clark comes back, clearly he's going to be an injury risk. For me, I'd imagine that getting a striker is going to be a big priority for the manager in January.
Which I find really interesting, and maybe this is kind of my own interest myself, and this might not interest anyone else, but Jason Cummins was a player that when we first got relegated to the Championship, I would have been more than happy for us to take a punt on, because he was very good for Hibs. He's got a little bit of bite. Yeah, he's a little bit, well, people say he's a bit off the planet, but I think, from speaking to people, he's actually a really nice lad with a bit of character, and someone like that in Scotland is not that unusual, let me tell you that. But he hasn't really done much for not just Shrewsbury, Forest, Luton, who he was on loan with, Peterborough. He hasn't really hit the ground running at this level at all, which I find really odd. But he scored the winner against us last year. But where's it gone wrong with Jason Cummins?
Yeah, without being, I'm going to be quite critical. How can you be a professional footballer who goes to training every week and not be fit? I just don't understand. So the new manager comes in. So basically, Ricketts was saying he's not playing because he's not fit enough. Steve Cotterill comes in and said, he'd like to play him, but he can't because he's not that fit. He seems to be trying hard, maybe too hard. In the FA Cup, he came on and could have passed to Ado, who would have an empty net, and he was really greedy and took his chance. And that's probably because obviously he wants to score. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he's just not fit. Like the new manager said he's not fit enough yet to play. And yeah, he's clearly a player and he's got a good finishing, but he gets to a point where you think, well, yeah, he didn't do anything at Luton, didn't do anything at Peterborough, didn't do anything at Forest. He's not really done anything at Shrewsbury. It gets to the point where you think, well, yeah, there's nothing lost there as such. But yeah, he does seem to be a good character. He seems to be well liked amongst the players and stuff, and managers always seem to be quite favourable about him. But yeah, he gets to a point soon where he's got to make a big decision. Like, is he going to get fitter and stay fit and play? Or is he going to, I guess maybe in some defence of him, we've had so many games, training probably isn't that intense. But he's got plenty of time and he's got enough knowledge, I'm sure, to keep himself fit. So for me, he needs to get himself fitter and get into the side because, yeah, as an outsider and even as a Shrewsbury fan, he should be pressuring Daniel Ado and Worley, and really he should be playing ahead of them, but he's not because when he does play, he hasn't performed, and clearly he's not pressing and training.
Because it's a strange one with Cummins, because I would have said he could have the potential to be a top level Championship striker back when he was at Hibs, and now he can't even seem to hit a barn door when he's at not just Shrewsbury, the clubs he's mentioned as well. So it's always an interesting one. Alongside obviously the players you've mentioned, I know Aaron Pierre had a really good period, I think last season and sort of beforehand. But who were the men to watch for Shrewsbury, do you think, coming into the game for Sunderland?
Yeah, so we've got a good goalkeeper on loan from Wolves. He's came from Villa, then went to Wolves and came on loan straight away.
We were after him. Yeah.
He's really, really good goalkeeper. And I think actually him missing played a part in our defence as well. The defence, obviously, he's a really good goalkeeper. So I think that really helps. He made some good saves last night against Lincoln, and really brave where he went with his hands for a cross and put himself in the danger zone. He's a really good goalkeeper. And then, Aaron Pierre, the whole back three I'd comment on. Williams, who we signed from Man United, as a young kid who's good, big friends with Marcus Rashford. He's really good. He's really fast. He looks a lot more confident. Yeah, Ebanks and Pierre in defence are really good. Charlie Daniels is going to be a threat from set pieces. Bless him, he's cotton socks. He's working really hard. He's 34 playing wing back in League One, which is not an easy task. In central midfield, Norburn and Vella have been doing really well, both quite mobile and good players. And then Sean Goss is an interesting one. So Sam Ricketts basically discarded Sean Goss, and he was training with the youth players. Steve Cotterill comes in and puts him in the squad straight away and actually registered him for the league. Goss didn't realise he could be registered at all. So obviously the manager had not told him or had been that clear with him. And he's been playing as a number 10. He's never played number 10 before. But against Hull, he had an 80% pass completion playing as a number 10. And some of the balls he was playing was just amazing. And then up front, Sean Worley. So yeah, I've mentioned most of the team there. That's because they've just been playing so well. And these, a draw against Stanley, draw against Charlton, and then we'll win against Hull and Lincoln. It's so refreshing because on the podcast we do a top 3, and this season it's been a real challenge to pick 3 players that have performed, and now you can almost mention the whole team. Yeah,
I mean the thing is as well for the people listening, if you don't know that, the wins against Lincoln and Hull came away from home as well.
Yeah,
there weren't like home games where is there such a thing as a home game these days?
I think you still used to your surroundings, aren't you? If you're a right back, you know where the stanchion is. I think it was Keown talked about this. When he was at Highbury, he knew where certain bits were, so he could look around and almost knew where he was on the pitch from looking at the ground. But yeah, clearly having fans screaming at the referee is going to have an impact.
Yeah, well, I think we're missing them if you look at our home form. So I'm kind of pleased we're away.
But our home form is horrendous. We haven't won at home in the league for such a long time. So maybe it'd be nice if we could get that home win on the weekend.
If you're playing Sunderland, that's probably going to happen. Just to touch quickly on Sunderland as well, I always find it really interesting, from the outside looking in, because when you're in that bubble of Sunderland Association Football Club, yeah, sometimes your opinions can differ. But what have you made of Sunderland's season so far from what you've seen?
Sunderland is always a funny one because you look at their squad and clearly got players that are good at this level. But yeah, I'm not surprised you changed your manager. Clearly you've got more potential. I thought it was an odd choice. It just didn't make any sense to me when you got Parkinson. He's known as a manager that plays very direct football, going to a side that should be dominating every game, dominating the league. It's just, for me, didn't make any sense whatsoever. And for me, it was always going to end in disaster. I'm surprised he lasted as long as he did, to be honest. I think for me, for me, Sunderland probably going to be the best team in the second half of the season. I wouldn't be surprised if you've got automatic promotion, sign a few players in January. Imagine Lee Johnson's going to, probably be a bit more of a modern manager and maybe get some better players in. But it's interesting, isn't it, that you'll bring in some of the other players back into the fold?
Yeah.
We tried to we got really close to getting Will Grigg on loan last January. A bit like Jason Cummings, he's kind of fallen away a bit at the moment, but clearly he's got potential. And you just look at your team and you've got some really good central defenders, a really good goalkeeper. There's no reason why you shouldn't be doing better than you are. And for me as a Shrewsbury Town fan, obviously being a smaller team, I'm sure your fans will appreciate this. I'll understand where I'm coming from. It's just quite funny. Looking at League One, you've got Ipswich fans whinging all the time. Sunderland fans, to be fair, don't whinge at all. Wouldn't put you guys in the same bracket as a fan base, but in terms of your clubs, both underperforming, and next year we could have Derby and Forest in the league as well. It's just really funny because you've got like Shrewsbury fans, and I don't know who else could I mention, Gillingham fans and other clubs like that, who are just just enjoying football and stuff, and then you've got some other fan bases that are a bit frustrated, but. Yeah, I think Sunderland. With your manager, obviously getting that 4-0 win on Saturday just shows there's a lot of potential in this squad, and that's why you should only sack a manager, isn't there? You shouldn't sack them. Like I'm a bit confused about Northampton, and their fans are really frustrated with Curl. But you look at their squad; it's weak. It's weaker than when it was when they were in League Two. And you look at our squad. Obviously, we weren't doing as well as we should do. But yeah, for me, Sunderland have got a strong squad. I'd expect you to push on, and I'm sure Lee Johnson will sign a few decent players in January, and you start pushing on. Because where are you in the league now? You say you're ninth, but I bet you're not very many points away from the top.
A couple of wins would put us in the mixer. Yeah. Absolutely, 100%. And I think I was frustrated with yesterday's game, but it's difficult to judge based on what happened. But before I touch really quickly on the final question, what did you think of Lee Johnson as an appointment? Because I liked what you said before about managers. You're never going to get overly excited. And I got really excited about the idea of Gus Poyet, and there was a lot of romanticism in that. And of course there was. When Lee Johnson came in, it was kind of okay, yeah, fair enough. That's not too bad. But a lot of clubs from outside seem to go, really good appointment because of where we'd come from. What did you make of the appointment?
Yeah, I think maybe as an outsider, And I think this is particularly true of Ipswich. Let's talk about Ipswich other than Sunderland, because I keep saying this. I'm not just saying this because your podcast. Sunderland fans and Ipswich fans are like chalk and cheese. Sunderland fans have a lot more humility and understand where you are. But at the end of the day, you're a League One team. It doesn't matter if you're Sunderland. It doesn't matter if you're Man City or Southampton or whoever comes down to this division. The fact is, you're a League One team. And you're going to get managers that potentially are good enough for League One. But there, for me, you've got a Championship manager. Lee Johnson's the funny one. He spent so much money at Bristol City. Like, we played Bristol City last year, and they were losing something like 400k a month or something. They were losing millions every year. The owners put 200 million in, and not to get promoted when you're spending that amount of money is maybe a bit of a question. But as managers always learn and get better. So for me, I think it's a great appointment for you guys. I think it's a good appointment. It should be interesting to see what he does. He'll play much better football, which I'm sure will help please your fans. But at the end of the day, you want to win games. I think he's a good appointment. Probably a better appointment maybe than Danny Cowley, but you'd imagine he's after a Championship job.
I think something went on there somewhere. We had the Lincoln chairman on last week, did the preview, and he alluded to it. I unfortunately couldn't get enough as I wanted out of him. Going into the game, I'd normally ask for predictions and stuff like that, but I'm probably going to change this a little bit because, as I alluded to at the beginning, I said if the game goes ahead, it seems like it's going to, from what I've been told. But Sunderland, it looks like they haven't confirmed the players that are self-isolating and stuff like that. But based on the lineup, it looks like McGeady, Maguire, Power, White, and potentially Danny Graham are going to be absentees because I haven't heard about any injuries with them, and they weren't in the lineup yesterday. So 8 first-team players, it was noted, that weren't available yesterday due to, I think, 1 had COVID, 7 had to self-isolate. You've probably seen a lot of the fallout from Sunderland fans yesterday about how bizarre it was. But what do you think about the games going ahead when you've got that many players that are unable to play?
Yeah, the Sunderland Echo article popped up in my timeline this morning, so I read it with the comments from the manager. And it is bizarre. There should be some really clear protocols in place and guidance of what you do. But the EFL saying, you can cancel the game at your own peril and we'll audit you afterwards and maybe punish you later is just really odd. It's no, you're not a business making business decisions, or it's not like I don't know, I can't think of an analogy, but it's just bizarre. And I would be very frustrated if we had 8 first-team players out. I guess it just shows the quality of your squad and the depth of your squad and your youth system and stuff. Because if we lost 8 players, we lost 8 players. We've changed 10 players against Lincoln last week in the Papa Johns and got thrashed 4-1. So I think it's a testament to the quality of your squad. But if we lost our first 8 players, we'd be absolutely screwed. I think your fans are quite in their right to be frustrated. And for me, it's just not good enough. And just without going on a big rant about the EFL, it doesn't really surprise us, does it? Yeah,
it's kind of one of those things where you can ask the question, but I think everyone's in the same opinion of recently we can kind of see with the EFL, how they ran and stuff like that. So I suppose, like I say, I'd normally ask final question would be predictions, but I'll ask a slightly different question for a final question. Does your prediction for Saturday or your outlook on Saturday's game change based on the fact that Sunderland have got most of their first-team players missing out? Are you looking as a win as opposed to maybe you'd be happy with a draw?
Yeah, I'm really frustrated. Me and Glyn do a prediction competition, and he actually went for a 1-0 win to Shrewsbury. I went for 1-1 on last Sunday. But if you've got that many players out, I'd expect us to win. So for me, that does turn. For me, it turns a draw into a win for Shrewsbury.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's probably why we're discussing the EFL potentially not doing the right thing by the fact that we're going to be getting cost points, unfortunately. But as always, Ollie, thanks for popping on. Thanks for giving us a lowdown on what's going on with Shrewsbury. And apart from Saturday, good luck for the rest of the season.
Cheers. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure, mate.